Hi guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Jenna and I'm Empress of Horror. So over the past week I have kind of been struggling thinking of which horror movie I want to review. I watch a ton of horror movies in a week and usually there's one that jumps out at me and I think I really need to talk about this. Although this week nothing in particular really screamed at me, so I was kind of like, what am I gonna review? And then I remembered that this week marks the beginning of May, which is Hexenot for a lot of pagans, Wiccans, Satanists and other spooky, witchy people. So I thought, what a better film to talk about this week than Midsommar. Midsommar was released in 2019 and it was written and directed by Ari Aster, who also brought us Hereditary. This film is starring Florence Pugh, Will Poulter, Jack Rayner and William Jackson Harper. And it scored an 83% on Rotten Tomatoes. So this film follows a young woman called Dani, played by Florence Pugh, who suffers a terrible family loss. She has a very rocky relationship with her boyfriend, and when she finds out that he and a group of friends are planning to go to Sweden to spend their summer, she ends up tagging along with them. They arrive at the festival and at first everything seems dreamy and magical, but in true Ari Aster fashion things quickly turn very disturbing. So when Midsommar was released, there was of course a huge hype around it following the success of Ari Aster's first film, Hereditary. And in my opinion, I think he exceeded expectations with this movie. Midsommar is iconic and I really think it redefines the horror genre. So now I'm going to talk about the film a little bit more in depth. So if you haven't seen this film, I really recommend you go watch it because it's fantastic and then come back. There is so much that I love about this movie. I really like Ari Aster and what he's brought to us so far. I do have to say though, this film is not your standard horror movie. It is very unconventional. If you're going into this film expecting your standard jump scares and dark atmosphere and some of the classic horror tropes, you might be disappointed with this film because it is none of those things. But what it is something completely unique and fresh and new to the horror genre, and it completely sets itself aside from all of the other horror films, which is one of the reasons why I really love this movie. It is a bit of a slow burn movie, so if you get distracted really easily or you like things a bit more fast paced, this might not be the film for you. However, this film does an excellent job of slowly building up the tension and the paranoia and the fear to the point that by the end of the movie, you don't actually realise how terrified you are. Ari Aster does a really brilliant job of setting a really subtle, unnerving tone and just amping that up really gradually throughout the movie. Personally, I like my movies, horror and otherwise, to affect me in some sort of way. I love movies that evoke an emotion, and I think that is why I really loved Hereditary and I really love Midsommar, is because both of those movies impacted me so deeply. Florence Pugh does an amazing job playing the character Dani. I'm quite an empathic person, so if there's a character that we're meant to feel a certain emotion for in a film, I usually do latch onto that and kind of go on the journey with them. And Dani's journey in this movie is hellish. Florence does such an amazing job of portraying the raw emotion that her character Dani is experiencing. In the beginning of the film, Dani really tragically loses her entire family. Her sister kills her mum and dad and then commits suicide. That scene alone is horrifying. And Dani's reaction to finding out her entire family is dead is just so real. I don't know anyone who watched this film and wasn't affected by her performance. And then of course we have her relationship with her boyfriend, who he's a dick by the way. You can tell that he is just no longer interested. It's very clear that he kind of wants out of this relationship. So that's another reason we feel so much sympathy toward Dani's character, is because she's just lost her entire family and she's with a guy who really has no interest in being with her anymore. Another thing I adore about this film is the colour palette, and that's another thing that really separates this movie from other horror films. This film is set almost entirely in broad daylight. We don't get any of the standard dark, shadowy, tense horror movie atmosphere. This film is literally one of the most bright movies I've ever watched, and it's still really effectively manages to scare the living daylights out of you. It just proves that not all horror films have to be dark and moody and atmospheric. in order to be scary. I also just loved all of the people at the commune and the rituals that they did and their whole aesthetic. You can tell that this film obviously takes a lot of inspiration from The Wicker Man, which is another movie that I love. With it being a little commune out in a secluded part of the forest, people performing pagan rituals and the maypole dancing, everyone with their white gowns on, their long hair and the flowers. I really enjoyed the kind of inspiration that you can see was taken from the Wicker Man movie. The setting of this film as well was just really, really beautiful. All of the little wooden houses and the huts and all of the paintings on the wall, it was just really, really aesthetically pleasing. My eyes were just really happy watching this film. I also love when film directors pay homage to other classic films of the genre. The first one that stuck out to me was as they're driving to the festival, the car is going along this windy road and the camera pans straight down and upside down on it. And that is a visual parallel to The Shining, and I'm a huge fan of The Shining, so I just really loved that. The cinematography in this film was done by Paweł Pogorzelski, who also did the cinematography in Hereditary, and he is the reason why this film is just visually stunning. And he's also responsible for so much of the tension in this movie. All of the shots panning the commune when Danny is in the middle of having a freak out. He does such a good job of using the camera work to really portray her anxiety. The way this film is shot is just, it's so beautiful, but it's also so terrifying. One of the first really unnerving scenes in this movie is the cliff ritual. That is not actually the real name, I just looked it up and I cannot pronounce it, but I was looking into it and it actually is a real ritual that used to happen in Nordic prehistoric times, where elderly members of the community would go to the top of a cliff and hurl their bodies off once they'd reached a certain age. They saw this as a natural end to their lives and leaving in the world in a way that was still honourable. But this film conveys that in a much more disturbing manner. And then we also have the scene with the hammer when one of the old people who jumps off the cliff doesn't die straight away. So this guy comes along and smashes his head in with a giant hammer. I feel like this film is very telling that Ari Aster has some sort of head trauma fetish. After all the head trauma that happened in Hereditary, we then get this head trauma, which is just glorious. And then of course we have the most disturbing ritual of all, which happens at the very end of the movie. This was the scene where I was suddenly aware of myself sitting honestly like... That's how I can tell I'm watching a good horror movie and that it's doing its job well. This is the ritual that the convent only perform every 90 years. It's a 9-person sacrifice to the gods that they worship, and the sacrifice is grim. We have the 2 guys that Christian was friends with, and they've both been murdered and stuffed with hay and made to be human scarecrows, along with some other people from the convent who willingly sacrificed themselves. They've not been killed yet, they're just sitting in this little wooden house waiting to be burned alive. And we have probably the most horrific one of all, which is Christian, Danny's boyfriend, who has been poisoned with some sort of paralyzing powder or something. But he's alive, he's awake and he's conscious, but he cannot move. He is just completely stuck in his own body. So they stitch him into the inside of a bear and sew the bear back up. So he is literally just inside the skin of a bear. So essentially all of these people get sat in this little triangle shaped hut, and Christian is wheeled into this hut in his bear suit. He's sat there and yeah, they just light it on fire. And it is seriously disturbing. Meanwhile, the camera just keeps on panning in on Christian's face and he's unable to like move or scream or do anything, but you just see like the dread and the fear and the terror in his eyes. It is horrific. So I think Ari Aster did an outstanding job with this movie. He really pushed the limits on horror films with his unique take on lighting and cinematography, and in my opinion he redefined the standards of how to scare people. I honestly have nothing bad to say about this film. I really wouldn't change anything about it. I thought it was all great. I'm sure as you can tell from the way I'm talking about this movie, I'm obviously going to give it a rating of 10 out of 10. I just think this film is fantastic. I'm also just a really big fan of Ari Aster's work and other A24 movies, so Midsommar really does get a thumbs up from me. It's definitely going straight on my favourites list. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Please let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. And if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. I'm also going to be announcing on my Instagram story this week which film series I'm going to be talking about for my first Franchise Friday. So thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see you guys very soon. Bye!